Hello guys and welcome back to the Box Show. This is episode 5 and today we're covering the Australian Grand Prix. Now it was the first time Formula 1 had returned down under since 2019. They'd cancelled the recent 2 events due to the COVID pandemic and it was a decent race. Let's say it wasn't one of Formula 1's best races ever. It wasn't better than the last 2 races that they've had in the season. But I'm going to try my best to go over it. And before we do, let's start with the pre-race news. Now, it was confirmed by Aston Martin that Sebastian Vettel would return to the grid, having missed the first 2 events due to testing positive for COVID. It was the first time he'd be teaming up with Lance Stroll this season. And Nico Hülkenberg would be further placed as a reserve driver, just in case anything happened again. But it was the only piece of news that travelled around the paddock this week, is that the 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel would return for the Australian Grand Prix. Now we're going to move on to practice sessions. I know this is a bit quick, the news, isn't it? Now, not a lot happened in practice. Now, not a lot goes on in practice, and it hasn't for the last 2-3 sessions that have taken place in both Australia, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. However, there were incidents in Australia where Sebastian Vettel had power loss, which didn't bring his return to 2022 in a good way or a good start for Aston Martin. Their poor run of form continues, as well as Lance Stroll crashed in Ep.5 into the barriers at turn 10, I think it was, a newly refigured turn 10. Australia had been refigured for the season. They'd refigured the chicane at turn 7, I think, where instead of just braking and turning right, they actually developed this fast zone, which is now the new DRS zone for Australia. So not a lot happened in both practice. The only news provided was that Australia had been refigured and that Sebastian Vettel was returning for Australia. But it's not a good start for Aston Martin in any way, shape or form. Now we're going to move over to qualifying. Not a lot happened in Q1 apart from an incident between Nicholas Latifi and Lance Stroll. Stroll was going to go for a flying lap until there was traffic behind him. Then he stopped and started going slowly. Then Latifi started pushing, in which Stroll moved to the right and crashed into Latifi. Now, Latifi stopped on track. Stroll kept going until he was forced to stop off the track, which initially brought out a red flag. Now, there were tensions brewing and sort of debates going around on whose fault it was. Was it Latifi's for going slow at the beginning and going fast, or was it Stroll's fault for going fast and then going slow? Here's what I believe is Stroll's fault. I do, because if you look towards the replay, I can't show you the replay because of copyright issues. So, picture this. Stroll's going slow, then he's going fast, then he's going to go slow again because there's traffic in the way. And then Latifi is slow because of traffic, then starts to push. Stroll moves over to the right and then crashes into Latifi. Whose fault do you think it is? I think it is Lance Stroll's fault, because he moved to the right when he shouldn't have, which ultimately made contact with Latifi's car. And even though a lot of people are going to blame Latifi for this, Lance Stroll must take the blame as well for moving over to the right and crashing into Latifi's car. So the red flag is brought out, and I believe Q1 is over after that. It's the usual eliminations like the Haas, the Williams and stuff like that. Then we move over to Q2. Not a lot happened in Q2, unfortunately, so there's nothing to provide on that. Q3 did provide a last-minute dramatic crash for Fernando Alonso, who crashed out at the turn 10, same as Lance Stroll did earlier. But Alonso brings out a red flag, and that is it for qualifying. Charles Leclerc gets pole position again, beating Max Verstappen and further solidifying Ferrari's dominance this season. Ferrari do look like title contenders this season. Charles Leclerc does look like he's pushing for the World Drivers' Championship as well. Could he get it by end of the season? I hope so, because it does bring out excitement in Formula 1 to see a new world champion. And it'll also be Ferrari's first world champion since Kimi Raikkonen in 2007. So Ferrari do have that long wait to go, let's say. So Leclerc's on pole for Ferrari, and then after that we do get a few incidents. There were reports on social media that a lot of the drivers have been called to the stewards for incidents of their own. Alex Albon had been disqualified from qualifying because he ran less than 1 litre of fuel, I believe. The regulations do state that if you do run 1 litre less than fuel, you will be disqualified and sent to the back of the grid. So Alex Albon was sent to the back of the grid for that. And due to the incident earlier between Lance Stroll and Nicholas Latifi, Stroll was given a 3-place grid penalty, which meant that even though he'd qualified P17, he'd be starting from P19 because of Alex Albon's disqualification earlier. Then we get on to the race. The race itself wasn't as entertaining as it should have been for the return of Australia, but, you know, a race is a race. What can you do? Sainz is the first one out in lap 2 after an incident he had with his rear. I believe his rear tyre locked up, or he was carrying too much speed into the newly refigured turn 7, I believe. So, or to turn 5, turn 6, turn 7. I can't remember these turns very well. But the newly refigured track, that it did have some disadvantages for Sainz. In other words, Sainz was carrying too much speed going into turn 7, and then ultimately spun and was stuck in the gravel. So Sainz was the first one out, leading Leclerc to mainly help Ferrari secure those points, but also help Ferrari secure the win. Other than that, it was quite a boring race. Not many overtakes did happen. There was some sort of moments in the race where Sebastian Vettel's horrible week continued. He suffered a crash in qualifying, and he suffered a crash in the race where he spun on turn 4 and ultimately lost his front wing, which ultimately cost him the race. He stopped on the track at turn 5 and had to retire, basically. He damaged his front wing. The damage was too great to fix, so he was forced to stop the car and retire, which meant Sebastian Vettel still didn't get his points, or hadn't got his points for the start of the season, which is pretty unfortunate for the 4-time world champion, because I like Vettel. I think Vettel's a really talented driver. I'd like to see him get more this season, but the way Aston Martin are at the minute, and the way the performance is at the minute, it seems pretty unlikely throughout the season. But who knows, maybe there's one race where Aston Martin do run things right and Sebastian Vettel does get his points, or maybe even a podium like he did in Baku. So hopefully we see some kind of improvement from Aston Martin. We did see some from McLaren. McLaren looked right on the pace with Lando Norris qualifying P4 and had a very good race in P5. I think he was P5. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. But no, Sebastian Vettel crashes out and that brings out a safety car. And then we suffer a huge retirement afterwards. Max Verstappen reported to have a weird smell on the car. The Red Bull powertrain department definitely not providing Verstappen with a very good Australian Grand Prix. He's forced to retire into turn 2 because of the weird smell, and it's probably a fuel leak. So instead of Red Bull gives you wings, turns out Red Bull also gives you fuel issues as well. So Verstappen is forced to retire, and Perez goes on the radio, what's happened with Verstappen's car? Perez's engineer replies, it's not relevant to our car, which does bring me the suspicion of, what are Red Bull trying to prove, or what are Red Bull trying to do this season. The Red Bull powertrain department still not bringing out the success that Verstappen needs to catch Leclerc up, but hopefully is not too much of an issue. I do hear Porsche are coming in to provide the power unit for Red Bull in the future, but it's going to be a few seasons before that happens, so Red Bull do need to get a grip this season if they ever want to compete with Ferrari for the World Constructors' Championships. The race itself, like I said, wasn't much to talk about. Just a few retirements. That was it. There were a couple of good overtakes, and there was almost a moment where Schumacher crashed into the back of an AlphaTauri. Could have been Tsunoda, I believe, not Gasly. But there were some incidents where you looked back and thought, yeah, I'm kind of lucky that didn't happen. Otherwise, the red flag would have been out. But yeah, Leclerc crosses the line P1 with Sergio Perez P2. And a surprise podium for George Russell in the Mercedes. Mercedes' pace looks very improving from what it was in Bahrain and what it was in Saudi Arabia. But George Russell finally gets his first podium for the Mercedes team. The replacement for Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, who finished P9, with Russell's teammate Hamilton in P4, Lando Norris in P5, Daniel Ricciardo in P6. The McLaren pace looking very decent and very much improved. Mercedes and McLaren looked very on it on both Saturday and Sunday, and they do look like they could push on for the remainder of the season. It's nice to see that the pace is still there, but it's not nice to see that the porpoising is still there, the bouncing. A lot of cars have suffered with that as of late, and Australia was no different. So that's it. Leclerc crosses the line P1. He wins the race, gets his second win of the season, and further solidifies his status at the top of the table for the Drivers' Championship. Looks like he could be World Drivers' Champion, but there's still many races left to go. There's still 20 races left on the calendar, which means Leclerc could still mess up, and there could still be an advantage given. So that's it for Australia. I did get a question from my regular viewer, Dave Doherty, who asked for my thoughts on Russell's performance. I thought Russell's performance was quite good. There's not much to talk about on Russell. I thought Mercedes was quite decent, although there are still improvements that Mercedes need to take. I'm not entirely sure they could get a win for the next few races, but there could be that moment where Mercedes look better than anyone and could finish on a 1-2. It's going to take an almighty mess up from Ferrari and Red Bull. It's going to take an almighty crash for that to happen. And we all know that happened one time in Singapore 2017. So Russell's performance was quite good. I liked his performance. I was very happy for him to get his first podium for Mercedes. I felt like it was deserved. And hopefully there's more on the way. But no, that's it for the Australian Grand Prix. I do apologise, there's not much to report in this race. It was quite a lacklustre kind of race. Not gonna lie, honestly. It wasn't as very good as Bahrain and Jeddah was, but hopefully we should get more exciting races on the way. We do have another 2-week break before we come back to Imola, so hopefully Imola should be a good one. But then again, I have had some thoughts about Imola, some wet races maybe for the cars to test out, see how good they are in the wet. Hopefully we get an exciting race when we head to Imola. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you do enjoyed it, please smash the like button. If you hated it, dislike it. I don't care. I do enjoy making these videos. It's really fun to do. And hopefully I should see you in 2 weeks for Imola. But till then, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Fergie TV. You guys have been my viewers. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.